Hey, Jim, it's Friday, 2 o'clock.
It
We
sure
say
is.
we do a little signal to noise today.
Lots of signals, and of course, we always have noise.
There is always noise, especially in a big movement week in D.C. like it's been
Yes.
this week, so we'll get to all of it. You all know the drill, I think, as you join in here on the Facebook Live with us. We'll chat here a little bit about what's planned, and Jim and I'll finish up a few housekeeping things in the background here first. But we want to talk about what you want to talk about, so drop a note there in comments. Give us a question. What do you want us to talk about on today's edition of Signal to Noise? And Jim, I sent you my list just for those watching. They can get kind of some cliff notes of what was on my list. With obviously talking about the swearing in this week of Joe Biden. What are we seeing in the early signs out of the Biden administration? I want to talk a little bit today, Jim, about the relationship between the Biden administration and rural America, and is that going to be any different than what we've seen in past administrations, most notably contrasting that relationship between the Obama administration and the Trump administration. Some big differences there. USDA has announced some key staff. We'll get your take on what they've announced so far, Jim. Talk about the article of impeachment going to the Senate on Monday, what that may mean for some of these reviews of appointees in the Senate. We had announcement from American Farm Bureau Federation yesterday, some suggestions on to the National Ag Statistics Service on changes they want to see in how they handle their reporting. Of course, we're going to talk about those midnight small refinery exemptions put through by EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler just hours before the new administration came in. We'll get the latest from you, Jim, on the status of the 1.9. Boy, I added $1 trillion out of that bill, didn't I?
Yes.
I typed 2.9. It means it should be $1.9 trillion COVID aid. Before we're done, it may be 2.9. Who knows? Jim will tell us.
And the 2.3 billion
and
that
the
we had last
2.3
Friday.
billion, yeah.
When are they going to get that money out?
Yeah, because we got some new news on that. You talked with John Newton earlier today
Yes.
from American Farm Bureau Federation, their chief economist. He was on AgriTalk with you and had a little bit of an update on that.
Yes.
We can talk about that. Executive order today from President Biden expanding SNAP benefits. We'll get into that a little bit, and then also an update on China. Anything else to add to that list, Jim?
That's a pretty good list right there.
It's a very long list. So appreciate the thumbs up, Melody, and send us a question. What do you want to hear from us today? Appreciate that, and send your feedback so we can talk about what you want to talk about on the Signal to Noise. Well, I think that covers the preamble, so let's get into the live recording. What do you say, Jim?
Here we go.
Let's do it. In 3, 2, 1. Welcome to DC Signal to Noise on this Friday. I'm John Herath alongside Pro Farmers Jim Wiesemeyer, who separates the signal and the noise for us. And Jim, a lot to sift through this week. Appreciate you joining us. And as always, as we've been mentioning, we've been doing this, recording this podcast live on Facebook Live at the AgriTalk Facebook page. So if you want to join in on the conversation next week and ask us a question live, you can do that at the AgriTalk Facebook page at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central on every Friday afternoon. So let's get down to it, Jim.
Sure.
Let's just start off with what ended up being a as different as everything was. It ended up being a very calm and a very normal, in many ways, inauguration this week.
Well, that'll show you what 25,000 at least troops will do for you and the barricades, etc. So I'm glad we didn't have any major developments, both not just in Washington, but at the state capitals either. It was a relatively quiet day, John.
Yeah, it really was, and quiet in terms of what we expected might happen with protest or anything else on that inauguration day. But then the Biden administration really hit the ground running. They'd been doing some work behind the scenes leading up to that, making sure that they had 17 executive orders ready to sign that first evening.
Yeah, it was a record number of executive orders for a president's first day in office. So he's already set a record there. And it does show he followed through on what he was saying during the campaign. And much like what Obama said he was going to do and Trump said he was going to do, they're delivering, at least in the executive order process, John. That's not codified into law, as we're seeing the flip-flops of a lot of, Trump policy that he made through either regulations or executive orders.
Yeah, indeed, and and you're seeing how quickly the Biden administration is trying to reverse a lot of those executive orders that the Trump administration put in place, and that shows, as you point out, some of the peril of doing these things by executive order rather than codifying them in
Yes.
regulation. But these initial executive orders really show us what the priorities are for this incoming Biden administration. What signals do you see from what we've seen come out of that office so far?
Well, the signals are, and you're going to see it next week too, because they're going to have a whole day on the climate change. You saw some indications of his energy and climate change this week, but they're going to follow through next week in a big way. I think Biden's going to announce a U.S. based climate summit on Earth Day, the 22nd of April. But his initial ones dealt with those sensitive areas. In the immigration area, in the some pipeline areas and things like that, and he has hit the ground running. And his overall tone of his inauguration, John, was unity. Now, and he even mentioned the spread between the urban and the rural, the uncivil war that has gone on. So that was interesting. But I caught a one-liner in the New York Times that said, "What's Biden's meaning of unity?" And the Times defined it as, to Biden and his team, they said, unity does not mean a concession or splitting the difference on policy initiatives. It means a renewed commitment to the broadest values of America. Well, that raises questions. Whose broadest values? But again, that's the overarching thing, and it's going to be. I hope he succeeds in unifying America, but there's hurdles galore because of the animosity between the two major political parties and groups that we've seen. And so the hurdles are there, and I hope Biden realizes that. But he's also, in his initial executive orders, that didn't truly reflect putting out olive branches that I could see. I'm not saying he's wrong or anything like that, but it's not a conciliatory framework. He's going to be quite aggressive.
Yeah, indeed, and they know their time is limited, as most presidents know coming in. And to be quite honest, a president that very likely is going to be one term, if for no other reason than age. So they know their time there, as I said, is limited. Terry commenting here, and I assume this is in reference to the Keystone XL pipeline. He has 42,000 jobs lost on his first day. I can't verify that number, but I
It's a
appreciate
chunk of
the sentiment.
jobs. Yeah.
It is a chunk of jobs. I will say that pipeline has been, its future has been in question even without this this executive order by President Biden. There's been challenges all along the way. So it's not it's not totally unexpected that this has come.
Oh,
but
not
it
with any
is,
Democrat. No, but it is 10% of our oil production, and it's around 50% of all the oil imports into the United States. And as I've said before, this just means more emphasis that we're going to have to import more oil, that same type of oil, perhaps from Venezuela and Russia. There's some adversaries there. So, from a geopolitical stance, it doesn't make sense. And even the pipeline.
Well, and from a relationship stance with Canada, doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, and there's, as Sean Haney told us this morning, Trudeau talked to Biden about it before the inauguration, and now apparently they're talking again today. But you're not going to change, that announcement, where even the pipeline people tried to come into the center ground. Now, where's the unity there again? by saying that they would allow labor union people to work. And some labor unions in the United States did not want to see this pipeline excluded. But from Obama on, this thing was not going to go. And we had several state tests in the courts, John, if you recall.
Yep.
Nebraska, Montana, I know there was another state. And you're going to see this. We've seen it in the years, most recent years, and I think it's going to continue litigation at the state level. And, look at the pesticides. Look at dicamba. That was a state litigated issue. So we're going to see this more often than not.
Well, and also it's a signal that it's nearly impossible to get a significant pipeline that crosses state lines done anymore in the United States because of that state by state litigation and what we've seen now happen on the federal arena on this. So let's talk a little bit about what may happen with what we've seen with history with the relationship between the administrations and rural America and specifically agriculture, and what we may see from the Biden administration. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Jim, but I think you'd have to go back to Ronald Reagan to see a president who embraced agriculture specifically and rural America in general as much as Donald Trump did. Now, I don't know that Donald Trump really understood agriculture and the details of it, but certainly embraced agriculture fully and acknowledged agriculture in a way that hadn't been done, as I said, since probably Ronald Reagan.
Oh, there's no doubt. For the copy, Trump said more words about agriculture, far more than Reagan did. Now, some of it was forced on him by his own actions relative to the challenge of China. I think he should have challenged China, but we had to have those trade mitigation programs. And then, interestingly, something that was out of his control is the COVID aid. And in working with Congress, they came up with a lot of money. Total, the trade mitigation and the COVID payments, it can round to $50 billion. That's that's a lot of money. When it came to biofuel program, you heard a split decision relative to Trump. And let's bridge this into your initial question, the Biden's role in the rural sector. And I'll even bring in soon to be again USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack. Remember when he left USDA after the Obama administration, he helped wanting to get the Democrats to expand the tent in the rural countryside. And so now that he's coming in, I don't think he's left that there. So I think they're going to continue to try to find back alleys. And they know the majority of rural voters are not going to vote on the Democratic side, but you don't need that many in order to make a difference. And one of the areas, John, could be the biofuels area.
Yeah, which EPA areas were something that were a sticking point for agriculture in the Obama administration. They continue to be in the Trump administration. So it will be interesting to see if Tom Vilsack, working with Michael Regan at EPA, can change that dynamic, and in particular, as you pointed out, look at biofuels as a solution to some of the carbon challenges that this administration is trying to take on.
Yes, and build it into their strategy that they will have relative to climate change. And what role will biofuels play? They can play a big role in that as far as their best practices, carbon credits, octane levels, and things like that. So that'll be an interesting one to watch out. But in the biofuels area, I've tried to figure out why EPA did what they did that 11th hour in doing the 3 waivers. And it was just like a shot across the bow. Why do that? But and then of course with this litigious society, it was appealed. They sought a stay, if you will, via the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. So here we go again. I mean, the best employment program I've seen for lawyers is the biofuel programs.
Indeed, they did get that stay.
They did.
So those three waivers are not going to go into effect until it's reviewed
And
by the
EPA
courts.
has until February 3rd to respond to that motion, and the
Right,
replies are due by the court, February 10th.
right. But getting back to this notion of the administration and its relationship with rural America, I think we do need to go back and look at history a little bit and look at that relationship between the Obama administration and rural America that really led to the strong relationship between rural America and the Trump administration, in that there was a sense that rural America and agriculture was sometimes not even an afterthought in the crafting of regulation in the Obama administration, probably most notably in the Waters of the U.S. rule, where farmers were told, we can't even tell you if your land, if water on your land is subject to WOTUS without a study from the Corps of Engineers. Well, come on, and that frustration over that relationship and lack of acknowledgement of the needs of rural America, I think, really led to the strong rural support for Donald Trump. Would you agree, Jim?
Yes, it got into emotions as well, and it was significantly unfunded mandates that cost a number of
Yeah.
farmers a lot of money, if you recall. Absolutely, and that did lead to the beginning of very raw nerves between the Obama side and many in the rural sector.
Yeah, and so, it'll be interesting to see if the Biden administration learned lessons from that. We have some indications that they have. Hearing from John Doggett, we talked to a couple of weeks ago on here, the CEO of the National Corn Growers Association said he's never seen outreach from an incoming administration like this, dating back to the Reagan years. So there are signs that this administration has an open ear to rural America in a way that hasn't been there in some previous administrations.
Yes, and you mentioned Michael, Reagan, the incoming EPA administrator, from North Carolina, and the farm groups came out and very much support him because of his experience in working particularly with the pork producers group in North Carolina. So that could be the initial test. So you bring in Michael Reagan, not only from a regulatory side in dealing with agriculture, but also with the coming climate change, and of course the EPA's role in the future RFS Renewable Fuel Standard Program, decisions. So at least they're building a force that already, John, that at least giving signals that they want to cooperate rather than attack like they did sometimes before.
All right, we've got a question coming in here from Gary that's going to lead into another conversation that's on the list. Gary asking about, Andy, talk about picking up the tab for school lunches after this year. Very popular among school-age parents, just saying. And that has been a key in this COVID period, that USDA has been aggressive in providing school lunches, not just for those who qualified under the previous program, but making sure that there was funding for school lunches for everyone to be either picked up while school was being conducted remotely, or they're in person now as schools start to return. So,
Absolutely.
Jim, any talk about expanding or continuing that program as it is?
The Democratic Party 101, it's almost in their bloodline to do whatever they can regarding increasing funding for food and nutrition. And of course that goes into the SNAP program, or food stamps, pandemic EBT it's called, that goes to students who would have qualified for those reduced school meals, if not free, had they been at school, been in session, John. But yes, if they get an initiative in at the White House or USDA and Congress, they're going to put it up the flagpole, John.
Well, in fact, we saw an executive order today that does extend those pandemic SNAP benefits and even adds to them.
And a reassessment, they're going to take a look at USDA's Thrifty food plan for determining SNAP benefits. So they're going to look at the requirements. So that's all goes in the process of expanding eligibility for food and nutrition benefits. That's Democratic Credo 101.
All right. Let's turn to these key announcements that we've been seeing rolling out from USDA. They've announced a number of staff. A lot of people who have been in Democratic infrastructure before, but not really, as we've seen in the past, key ag policy and industry leaders that have been out in the public outside of Tom Vilsack so far.
Yeah, well, yeah, I like to point out the deputy secretary. They did announce her pretty quickly,
Yeah.
Jewel Bronow. Now, she's the Virginia Ag Commissioner. I think it's interesting of her background because she was a former state executive director in the Farm Service Agency. So I think that bodes her quite well, just as a signal to a lot of farmers that if you know about those complex programs, and she had to have known being a SED. And she also was at the Virginia State University, headed the School of Agriculture, down there. So she knows the educational process. And one of her passion areas is rural health matters, mental health matters. So she brings
really?
she brings a pretty good pedigree there. So I think that was a good sign of her comprehensiveness that she brings into that role. And as I keep on saying, John, I think the top level people, her included, should be looked at very carefully because I personally see Vilsack as a transition ag secretary, perhaps in a few years going to either another position in the Biden administration or either outside again. Don't rule him out for a run for the Senate, especially if Grassley doesn't run.
Right.
So it's that areas. And so you look at those other people. The only one that I wanted to also make sure I mentioned is Mike Smith. He's senior advisor in the Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation. He used to work with Debbie Stabenow, and he used to be in the Farm Service Agency. And as John Newton of Farm Bureau told us, he knows how to get checks out. He knows the process. So I think maybe we can get an acceleration of the $2.3 billion and the December 21st program that we saw that Congress passed. That for right now they have to change the computer softwares and getting the regulations out, but he could speed that up.
Yeah, indeed, and those two key ties to FSA, as we've seen in the past year or 2 years in particular, FSA could really make or break an administration at USDA. There are some challenges there, mostly technology. Some of it's been addressed, but really, I think the staff of FSA makes up for a lot of other inadequacies in the structure at FSA as far as the technology and the other equipment that they need there. And I think you'd agree to that, Jim, that really the staff overperforms at FSA and has really helped USDA look pretty good in some of these disbursements, overcoming the challenges that those offices have faced.
Absolutely. Let's hope now maybe we can get a consistent response from the new FSA regarding a topic we almost cover here on a weekly basis, update on WIP plus payments, because the emails I keep getting and calls from pro-farmer members, some of them have received the second 50% WIP plus payouts. And then others tell me they have not, and they've checked with their FSA office and they go, no, they can't get them yet. So I asked verbatim a USDA official, give me the words to say. And here's what we were told. The current policy is to, quote, continue to pay producers on the register the first 50% of WIP plus, then pay the quality payments, those applications, if approved, and then see how much money is left for the other 50% on WIP plus. When we put out that the other day on profarmer.com, I knew the emails were going to come saying, well, some states are paying that extra 50%. So is there different rules for states? So I've asked that question, and I don't have a response to that one. So we still have a checkerboard pattern on this one, unless I'm not seeing something that I should.
All right, so we continue
The
to look
funding
there.
is there. The
Yeah.
funding is there. And if it's not there, you're going to see it added on. Those payments will eventually be made. That's your bottom line. It may be frustrating. It may be that your particular state or county office is so far behind for legitimate reasons, or they may be faced with a COVID impacted staff as far as they can't get caught up, things like that. There are reasons why some counties are more accelerated than others. So that's all I'll say on that subject now.
Well, but let's not forget, though, that this is going back to some disasters in 2018. We're 3 years
2018,
older.
2019, yes. And then it got to a point where they did need more money, but we got that in the December 21st thing. I think $1.5 billion. I know a minimum of $1 billion. So I don't really think it's a funding issue, even though they're saying, well, we have to make sure that money is left over for the other 50% on WIP plus. I'm not hearing that from the funding people in the House and Senate. That people, staffers who worked on this subject, John. So they just need to clear the decks on this program. It has not been. I think this was the whipping boy. This was the last thing they considered.
Pun not
they
intended.
need. Yeah, they need. Yeah, they need to regroup on this program. It has not been implemented, very well at all.
All right, well, let's turn to a couple other programs. As you hinted, we got a little bit of an update from John Newton from the American Farm Bureau Federation this morning on Ag Talk. Let's start with $2.3 billion that was left over from CFAP 1 and CFAP 2. USDA, as we know, put out a new program targeted mostly towards contract growers, mostly pork and poultry. The application for that is open right now. I think it runs through towards the end of next month. And
Yes.
Jim, that should really be fairly, once we get through that application period, that should go out fairly quickly, shouldn't
Absolutely.
it? Because the mechanism's already there.
Yeah, it is. And that's 2.3. Now, primarily, what did John say? 91% is for contract poultry and hog producers. 91% of that money.
Yeah.
So, but yes, they just, now it could, it opened up, the sign up opened up January 19th. So they're ready to roll. USDA knows how to do that program, and they'll grease it now.
Now, what is in question, or not in question, but we don't know the timeline yet, or fully the mechanism, is that some $13 billion in the latest coronavirus aid package that was passed last month, which includes some direct per acre payments, but more do we know about that at this point, Jim?
That's the $20 an acre. Now, what we've been told in the past, and Newton didn't have any update other than maybe with Biden's people coming into FSA, Stabenow's person, maybe we can get an acceleration of that. The initial indications that USDA has been telling us is that these payments should be made by the end of March, end of the first quarter, if not early the second quarter. Now, that's the official timeline that they're giving out. Maybe they can speed the process once these new people are coming in, but they have to write new software. They have to test it. And then they're doing the regulations, since they did change a number of things, and the plus up and the $20 an acre and things like that. So it's coming again, and that's a combined. That's a chunk of change that will be put out this calendar year, John. Mm-hmm. That $2.3 billion and these additional funds from December 21st legislation, that's going to make farm income, coupled with the relatively much better prices we've seen for corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, and some livestock, not all. That's going to lift up that farm income to a level that we wouldn't have thought 3 months ago, looking at from 2020, net farm income versus this year. So that's a good thing. Even though we've had a downturn the last 2 days, I think we were down 49-cent soybeans the last time I looked today.
Yeah, I was going to whisper, you may not want to be saying it today, but yeah, on the trend.
Markets have to breathe. Markets have to breathe.
All right. Bradley asks, are Prevent Plant's 2020 acres covered in that $20 per acre payments? Do we know that yet?
I don't think we know that yet. We're waiting for the rules and regulations. That's another thing. We're waiting for the rules and regulations on that.
So we'll have to see what
But it's
USDA.
usually planted and considered planted. So if they go on history, to me, it should, although you can never double dip. So you'd have to subtract what you got. Usually you have to subtract what you've already received as a benefit because there should be no double dipping.
Okay. All right. Well, we will double check that when we do get the rules
Yes.
and regulations for that payment program. We have talked, Jim, at length at your point about the ag economy is in a better position going into 2021 than we would have thought even just 3 months ago. As we pointed out repeatedly, USDA says 36%, a little north of 36% of farm income came from government payments in 2020. That is not expected to continue with ad hoc payments in 2021 and beyond, which left some concern because while markets are picking up part of that gap, they're not going to pick up all of it. We have talked before that USDA and Congress may look at the Commodity Credit Corporation and carbon credit payments as a way to make up some of that. Anything new developing on that?
On what? Developing on what now?
Using the Commodity Credit Corporation to make
Oh,
carbon credit payments.
no, nothing new, but stay tuned because not just U.S. Ag sector interest, but a number outside of USDA is looking at that Commodity Credit Corporation Charter Act. I would look for developments of potential changes once we get into two things: a budget reconciliation bill, which eventually we're going to have for this fiscal year that ends at the end of this September, and it's coming in the next month or so probably. And then various appropriation bills that they'll open up, especially USDA, that you're going to see some attempts by both political parties to amend the CCC Charter Act, usually for their gain, John. I did want to update. I was looking when you were asking the question. Farm Bureau sent a letter dated January the 21st, yesterday, this is live here, relative to prevent plant. The financial support for acres prevented from being planted will ensure farmers have financial resources to recover from COVID-related damages. For these reasons, we, meaning Farm Bureau, urge USDA to make both planted acres and acres prevented from being planted eligible for additional COVID-19 relief payments. So that tells me it's still up in the air, but Farm
Right.
Bureau is urging that they, be made. Okay?
All right. And I would think that with the funding available, that would certainly there would certainly be funding to include the PP acres in that payment program.
I would think so. Yes.
All right. Well, since we're talking about Farm Bureau, shall we break into their thoughts
Sure.
on the National Ag Statistics Service?
Sure.
Yeah, Farm Bureau had a 4-month study. They had a 10-member commission look at the National Ag Statistics Service, and their reports made a number of recommendations that really kind of boil down to two things, Jim. One is they want increased transparency. They want things such as forums across the country where NASS does essentially a mock lockup for groups to see how the process runs. They want peer reviews by land-grant universities of the reporting that not all of it, but some of the occasional reporting that USDA NASS does. They want, if there is, say, a weather event that happens after the data is collected, it impacts the numbers that are being reported. They want at least there to be a note there. John Newton said on AgriTalk this morning they'd even want a mechanism for USDA to delay that reporting if there is a significant event that dramatically changes the outcome of that reporting. And then on the flip side, they want increase in use in technology at NASS, more satellite data, more digging into existing data sets at USDA to form those reports. I got a quick response from NASS last night that basically said, hey, we're already working on and implementing a number of these things, and we appreciate the input from Farm Bureau, and we'll continue to work with them. Does anything come of this, Jim?
I think it will because, I applaud Farm Bureau from bringing this out, for bringing this out, because they've been hearing from a lot of their members, as we have at Pro Farmer, ever since the summer. More than a few farmers said the crop isn't there, the crop isn't there. And I know AgriTalk had Lance Hainig on, and I thought he defended as much as he could the NASS methodology. However, there should be more transparency. I know that they want to improve NASA's. You got to rebuild the trust in the farming community because it's not to the level that it was just a few years ago, John. And also, Farm Bureau said most importantly, farmers need to provide NASS with accurate information. So it goes hand in hand. I think the most intriguing aspect was, some of the things you said. Use real-time technology, such as remote sensing. If you have a major event, after the survey was taken, and you can try to gauge the impact and maybe build that in. Now, I know that's easier said than done. I'm not quite sure about not putting out a report because what the market does is the surveys USDA takes tries to be at the first of the month, if I recall, or thereabout. And so that we can adjust even though the number is not maybe accurate the day it was put out, it serves as a base of which to either increase or decrease depending on the weather and other events. But I think USDA should put a little more copy in to explain what they did and how they did it. In particular, I thought the biggest news out of AgriTalk's interview with Hainig at NASS was the grain stocks report because where Hainig said it wasn't the on-farm stocks, it was the off-farm stocks, the commercial ones. That raises questions because they should have a pretty good data check on the commercial side. Why was the commercial sector so off in reporting to NASS? He didn't address that. And so that's what I'm asking that question now. That's a significant issue to me of why the commercial sector just fell down in their reporting. Well, what reasons were there? And that should be looked at because huge differences in the grain stocks, report that we saw.
Yeah, indeed. And was it off for some reason, or was it held back and reported later? Either by fate or by on purpose.
Yeah, I'm not talking about any potential skullduggery, but you got to rule that out. However,
right.
It just when I saw it, I read the story on agweb.com, and then I listened to the tape. I go, ooh, that's a storyline there that I want to get involved with. So, we have some follow-up, questions going on. And then, as I mentioned, the cotton number, if you would have talked to anyone in cotton country, especially Texas, you would have known early on that USDA was not only too high on the cotton crop, they were very high, and one of the best cotton people I know, who I can't name, when I asked this person to respond, he said, I'm not sure if COVID-19 prevented NASS from doing as many objective surveys or not. The fact of stopping district numbers in Texas just added to the problem. As if we had known what they were showing for the high and rolling plains, we could have easily identified and weighed in on those numbers. As it was just a state number, we could only assume where the issue was. So there's transparency that USDA suddenly, arbitrarily, I was told, last year decided to change their system relative to cotton. We need it by district. And as Farm Bureau reported in their excellent recommendations, if more funding is needed, they'll help push for that because this is just too important not to get the best numbers estimates, the best ones we can get out of NASS, because I used to be a beat reporter and used to call in those reports under lockup, went into lockup, and a lot of effort goes into this. I just think it needs to be improved now and for some key changes, because you don't want to get the farm sector not believing those numbers. It's hard enough the way it is, and you'd want these USDA numbers to come out, because if they were not put out from USDA, that would give other people a step in the jump up, because they'll have the ability to pay the private industry to do their own surveys.
Yeah, and if the farm sector doesn't believe the numbers, that just makes the numbers even less accurate, because there's less participation from the farming community, and that which is key to the accurate numbers. And if I can make a couple of observations on this. One, I know there's all kinds of stuff swirling around the internet every year about, speculating that there's some conspiracy to change the numbers. I can tell you flat out that is not true. That doesn't happen. USDA, for better or for worse, follows the data that is in front of them. A lot of people complained about that in the 2019 growing season, all growing season long, but it turned out following the data was the right thing. In 2019, despite what everybody said, they had the crop number pretty dead on all through the year. The same cannot be said for 2020. Particularly the November data, to go to a 3.8 bushel per acre drop in corn yield from November to January signals to me that there was something wrong with that November data. There was something, and Lance Honig on AgriTalk said they went back and looked at it, didn't find any anomalies, but it still says to me there was something wrong in that, because there's a little bit of harvest still going on in November, but it was mostly done for that November survey. So there is no reason to have that big an historic difference in yield between November and January. So I think they should go back and look more closely at where that disparity took place. I know Lance said that they had so many more surveys for the January. They had 10 times the surveys. 10 times the surveys for January than they did for November. Still, why was that November number so far off, and what can you do to improve it for 2022 and beyond?
And to be fair on NASS, I know Chip pointed out that NASS in the monthly reports was either at or below the low end of the private trade estimates. So they had the right trend, but they were significantly still overstating, the size of the crops.
Yeah, indeed. So. And again, we're talking about all this that Farm Bureau is pushing to and more embrace the use of technology. NASS has been moving that way. They've been using more and more satellite imagery, in particular, in doing these surveys. They've also been doing some parallel work to, look at technology that might be used in the surveys, but isn't currently. But look how, if they use that data, how it would impact the survey. So they're doing the work towards that. I think Farm Bureau just wants to see that accelerated and broadened.
Two other points. As I've said before, John, they're statisticians. They look at the survey. They want to do a good job. It's not that they come into this saying, oh, we want to do a very bad job. No, they have pride in what they're doing. It's just like we as journalists. We want our stories to be as accurate as possible. We don't go into it hoping for fake news, But the second one is, many in the private industry have weekly or even sometimes daily crop estimates. Well, the USDA does not have the luxury of that, because they do the monthly survey. So always remember that, audience, that USDA is a base, is a placeholder, if you will, as of the beginning of the month. And it's easy to make a pot shot if you want to, but it's better be a fair one. Because if you have a middle of the month estimate, that's comparing apples and oranges. So I know that's not adequately reported enough. That if you frequently do updates, and many analysts do, and I don't blame them, on a weekly basis, USDA doesn't do that.
Yeah. I got just a few minutes left, so if there's something you want us to answer or talk about, don't forget to drop a note in the comments section there. A couple things I want to get to still on the list, Jim, before we go, and that is the get more details where we stand with that COVID aid and update on China. Let's start with the COVID aid, the $1.9 trillion proposal that the Biden administration is going to put before Congress. already signals that that dollar amount at least is not going to stand as it is. Will we get something through, and what has to change in order to get it through?
Well, eventually, yes, you will get something through. That's for sure. We don't see the unity, however, on this issue. A number of Republican senators, moderate and others, are saying that $1.9 trillion is too top heavy on that one, and they don't like some of the features, the $350 billion for state and local aid that they think is just bailing out some bad decisions on New York City, Chicago, California, etc. So it's going to go one of two ways, John. If efforts to get a consensus, to try to get unity from both sides on this one over I think the next week to 10 days, then the votes won't be there, so they'll have to skinny it down in order to segment it. But if the Democrats don't want to do that, then they'll hold it off. They may even have a vote and not have it, have it be defeated in the Senate if they want to. But I don't think that they should do that. But if they don't have the votes, then they'll wait and roll the COVID aid into a budget reconciliation bill that is coming. But it looks like that could be around the March time frame, because that's when we're going to get other aspects. Why? Well, what about budget reconciliation? You only need a majority vote in the Senate, right, and not the 60 votes. That's why the budget reconciliation process is another option that the Democrats can and will use if they have to.
Articles of impeachment go to the Senate on Monday. Does that throw a monkey wrench in those negotiations for COVID aid?
Well, it's the attitude, the feelings, the emotions, the pent-up anger. That doesn't solve anything. And what we said before, that Biden, I think, legitimately so said the country needs to be unified. This is not an approach to unify the country. So, but now what can happen is they're going to have a split day in the Senate. In the morning, they can do legislation, nominations, etc. That's plenty of time. And then in the afternoon, or vice versa, they can do the hearings relative to the controversial impeachment article, because there's constitutional questions whether or not they can even do that to a non-sitting president. Democrats say yes. Republicans say no. So you've already got fractures right there.
Yeah, there is some precedent for it, but I agree with what you said on AgriTalk this morning. It probably will be subject to judicial review eventually, even there is, as I said, some precedent for it.
Yes. So that's where we're at. Yes, they can do two things on the same day, John. And maybe the Senate can be in 5 days a week like most Americans work. Rather than their 3 days a week. Maybe they shouldn't fly home or fly wherever on the weekend for a while, do some work.
Indeed. All right, last thing on my list that I wanted to hit was an update on China. And Eric, our producer, if you could throw up that graphic first. This is from John Newton, who we've been talking about a lot and talked about last week. In fact, I would encourage you see his Twitter handle on there. It's at new10, the number 10, at new10 _ag-econ. So I would encourage you to follow him for all kinds of great information like this. But Jim, a graphic showing that, we have made great strides in phase one ag purchases from China in 2020. And it's too small for me to see on the screen, but some 20-some $billion in 2020 still falls short of the
23.8 bill. Yeah, 23.8.
Yeah, it falls short of the record in 2014, but still a great improvement over the previous couple of years. What does this tell us, Jim? Are we on the right track with those commitments by China, even if they fell short of what they said they would do in 2020?
Yes. Well, we were on the right track relative to calendar year 2020, which was the first year, minus really, they didn't get going until February 15th, and then it really didn't start in earnest until April. So we lost 3 months' time. That, John, plus the COVID 19 impacts in China, U.S., and around the world, and logistics systems, things like that. 60 over 65% of that commitment was met.
Yeah.
I'll take that. I'll take that. Now, there's issues for 2021 where it was 36.5 billion for 2020, and then 43.5 billion for 2021, the year we're in. That looks a little lofty number, but at least I think they showed as good as faith as possible. I know in the beans area, the sorghum area, the hog area, etc., and of course their renewed appetite for U.S. corn. I'll take it, John, and not just the quantities of purchases that they made, cotton and other beef, etc., but also in those other commitments in the technical area that made trading between the U.S. and China, more efficient.
Yeah, of course, China took some action in the waning days, or actually the last day of the Trump administration, sanctioning some Trump officials. Does that have any impact on the ongoing relationship?
Well, I think it is a signal that we're into this murky area again. The China watchers, Pro Farmer Consults, are nervous because they're saying they're seeing an increase in the Chinese literature. They're seeing increased aggressiveness on the part of China's leader, Xi Jinping, who's flexing muscles. So I think China could be President Biden's first initial geopolitical test. I'm not quite sure how, but these sanctions, where China says is tit for tat relative to the sanctions that the Trump administration put on them, and they really were rankled with some statements that former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, where they listed a number of individuals cannot go to China, and of course
Right.
Mike Pompeo was at the top of the list. But what Biden did was very interesting to show aggressiveness on his part relative to China's one China policy. He invited a Taiwanese official to his inauguration.
Oh,
Let's
really?
just say that more than rankled China. So now the signals have been sent by both countries. So you hope diplomatic channels are in process. I do know that the Chinese papers have said they changed they're revamping in China their trade negotiation team ahead of possible fresh talks with the Biden administration. Now, that's a good signal if that's the case. So a lot of moving gears here, John. So we'll see. But I know, I don't know, Hua, he's 60, was appointed chief international trade negotiator. It's a position that has been vacant since late 2018. So a lot of changes going on in both countries, John. So we'll see the next step. Let's hope it's talking. You got to talk to avoid any major problems. Biden is not going to lift the existing sanctions, I don't think, anytime soon, because he wants to use it as leverage to get
Right.
whatever Biden and his people want out of potential phase two with China.
And just underscores the need to quickly get a Secretary of State and U.S. Trade Representative through the Senate and confirmed and ready to do business.
And we should have that next week, I think.
Good deal. All right. Well, speaking of next week, where are you watching for signal in the coming week?
Well, I'll continue to monitor the COVID aid package to see what timelines we're going to have along the lines that we discussed, both timelines and process, and two, the U.S.-China relations, since that continues to be the I think, biggest geopolitical issue, and the unfolding of other personnel. When will USDA Secretary Vilsack be confirmed? Not a question. He will be confirmed. It's when. It can happen pretty quickly to get it out of the committee and onto the Senate floor. So those are the major things I'm going to look out for.
And I would add to that list, I think key to everything that the U.S. government needs to be doing to free up everything else is see if they can figure out how to more aggressively deliver vaccines next week and overcome the challenges that they've had in their first week in office.
You've got to get the vaccines out, the amount of vaccines out there, because I finally got a both a phone call and an email from the Virginia Department of Health saying, okay, we got your sign up, but don't do anything else because it's going to be a few weeks before we have the necessary volumes of vaccine for you to even sign up for an appointment to get the vaccine. And I've heard that from other people in other states. But we have very differences in how different states have reacted to the volume of vaccine. Some are better than others. So I think we're seeing a scattershot on this one as well. And Biden has taken a more national, federal, perspective under the vaccine program, as opposed to Trump, who left it more to the states. And so just a difference of, structure.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, Jim, as always, a real pleasure talking with you this week. Let's do it again next Friday.
Okay, we will.
All right, that wraps it up for this week's edition of DC Signal to Noise.